Welcome to the Work Hard, Play Hard podcast. My name is Rob Murgatroyd, and I'm a former doctor turned lifestyle entrepreneur. Each week, I interview some of the best minds on the planet on the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment. Come take this journey with me. Excuses are over. It's time to live.
You know, one of the guys that was there on my team, he was a 12-year veteran at that point. He sees how nervous I am. He comes over to me and he's like, "Hey man, look, you know, things are going to get crazy when we hit the ground. It's going to be really busy. I just want to let you know we're always here for you. We're not going to let you fail. This is a team." You know, when you're faced with what you think is going to be your death, you know, I didn't worry about how much money I had or the car that I drove, or say to myself that I wish I'd worked more. You know, I thought about certain aspects of my life that I really wish I had improved. And I crept up to the corner of the building, kind of exposed myself to get this vantage point real quick. And then all of a sudden, it felt like I got hit in the stomach with a sledgehammer.
Okay, before we jump into this interview, I want to invite you to be considered for my 2019 traveling mastermind. So go to workhardplayhardmastermind.com and fill out the application, and we'll jump on a call to see if you're a great fit. This year, we'll be in Boston doing lots of cool things like training with Tom Brady's trainer, Alex Guerrero. In the middle of the year, we'll be heading to Monaco doing things like vintage car rides through the French Riviera. And then we're going to wrap the year in Florence, Italy, doing things like truffle hunting and hot air ballooning over Florence. Look, life is all about fulfillment, and I really try and walk the walk. So if you are looking to be part of our tribe of 28 high-achieving entrepreneurs that are in the 6- and 7-figure range, fill out your application at workhardplayhardmastermind.com to be considered. So think of the mastermind as having two parts. The first is the trip itself, and the second part is what goes on over the 4 days within the mastermind. Our group of 28 entrepreneurs will help you brainstorm and accelerate what you want to achieve in 2019. And we'll do that through a variety of different exercises, brainstorming activities, breakout sessions, goal-setting sessions. You know the drill. So go to workhardplayhardmastermind.com, fill out an application, and we'll jump on a call to see if you're a fit. All right, let's jump into today's episode. What's up, everybody? This is Rob Murgatroyd, and welcome to another episode of the Work Hard, Play Hard show. This episode features Kevin Flike. You can find him on Instagram and elsewhere at Wounded by War. Judging from his Instagram handle, you can probably surmise that he was a soldier. I want to have Kevin on the show because I can't imagine a better example of someone who decided that he was going to truly play full out and live his life the way he wanted to do it. On September 25th, 2011, he was wounded in Afghanistan. He took a bullet to the abdominal aorta and he almost bled out on the battlefield. And during his rehab, he made a decision that he was going to truly embrace and fulfill life the way he wanted to. And he went on to get dual master's degrees, one from Harvard, one from MIT. And his story was so inspiring because there's so many examples of ways that we can grab ourselves by the bootstraps, lift ourselves up, and go after exactly what we want. I love this story. I loved Kevin. I was privileged enough to have him as a guest speaker at my mastermind in Boston, and we talked a lot about that. I think you're going to get so much from this episode. So be sure to take a screenshot of this episode, share it on the socials, and remember to tag me and Kevin Flike at Wounded by War and let us know what you thought. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation I had with Kevin Flike. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Rob, thank you so much for having me.
You know what, man? I am so excited to do this interview. It was an absolute pleasure in Boston listening to you speak. And now I get to have you for this next 45 minutes or so to talk about more of the things that sort of like triggered my interest of things that I want to talk to you about. So thank you for making the time.
Hey, no problem. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was an absolute honor to speak to your group last week.
Yeah, everybody loved it. Everybody had a great time. And I think what we'll do today is we'll first talk a little bit about your story, and then we'll talk about how your life is different after your story. And then we'll wrap with some rapid fire questions and talk about some things that you're doing to sort of help the fulfillment part of your life. Cool?
That sounds great.
So can you sort of describe what growing up in Stillwater was like in upstate New York? I grew up in Queens, so you have to understand that's the filter that I have.
That's what I always tell people, when I'm from New York, they always imagine the city. I'm like, no, there's a big state there also. So I grew up. I grew up in Stillwater, it's a small town outside of Saratoga, New York. Incredible place to grow up. I grew up right next to the Saratoga battlefield on the Hudson River. It was a really small town. Everybody really knew each other, and I really think that town is the reason why I am the person that I am today. Just had incredible coaches, teachers, mentors, people that were really invested in me from a very young age and just teaching me how to overcome, teaching me right from wrong, and putting me on the right path. So it was a super tiny town, right? What did your parents do for a living there? Yeah, my parents are both from the town there, and my parents went to high school together, actually. My father was a serial entrepreneur. My mother, she really took care of the family side of the house. There was 3 boys in the family. And my father was a serial entrepreneur. Incredible success story. He graduated second to last in his high school class, didn't finish college, but just had this vision for himself that, he wanted to be independently wealthy. He wanted to be his own boss and just had this entrepreneurial mindset. So he started a series of different companies. That's just, I think, as any entrepreneur does. They start something, they'd make the quick assessment and see if that's actually going to work or not, and then move on to the next idea. And so after numerous iterations, he started doing dollar stores in the late 80s. And after he opened up one of the stores, it just was so successful. He said, I think this is what I found, and sold off some of the other businesses that he had started and just focused all of the energy and attention on doing dollar stores. And so at its peak, in upstate New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, he had about 30 stores. And so, we had this incredible family business that really changed the fortunes of my life and kind of changed the directions a little bit of it. It also gave me this opportunity to see the work that my parents put into this company and to put into the family. And so my childhood was a little different than I'd say most people, because we spent our time playing sports, going to school, or working at the family business. But it really taught me the value of what you can achieve and what you can accomplish if you have a vision and you're willing to put the time into it. Were your parents involved in the military in any way, either of them? So my parents, both of them were not in the military. However, other generations had a lot of military experience in our family, dating all the way back to the Civil War. My family had the oldest surviving Civil War member in the state of New York. So there was just always something that was very prevalent in the family. I think kind of the area that I grew up in was so prominent in the Revolutionary War. So my family was really big in history. And then ultimately, starting in 7th grade, I went to an all-boys Catholic military school about 45 minutes from the town that I grew up in. And that experience, I think, really hammered home, the love of God, love of country, and just doing things that were bigger than yourself. What do you think motivated your parents to put you in that school specifically? I think that they just noticed that that was going to be the best fit for myself and my brothers. Faith has always been a really big thing in my family. And so to have a combination of a great education, very good academic side of the house, good athletic side of the house, and then to be able to infuse the faith into that on a daily basis was something that was very intriguing to them. All right. So I want to fast forward a little bit to after college. You made the decision that you were going to enlist in the Army. Did you always want to do that? In other words, when you were in that school, were you like, this is what I'm doing, I know that I'm doing this, or did you graduate and say, I want to do this? So when I was in my freshman year, we were sitting in our military science class, and we got to watch Navy SEAL Hell Week on TV. And you're 14 years old, so half of the class is just staring out the window. The other half of the class is like looking at the screen, wondering why anybody would want to ever do that with their life. And I'm just sitting there as these men are basically getting tortured through the training. And I'm like, that's exactly what I want to do with my life. Why? I love to see how hard it was and how you're going to test yourself physically and mentally and really start to understand what you were made of. So I think that was really the initial intrigue of the special operations community towards me. this ability to go out there and test yourself and push your limits. And as I got older, that was still very fascinating to me because I just wanted to see if I could do it. But then also the patriotic side of serving my country really started to take hold. And then 9/11 happened in my senior year of high school. So I had this fascination of being in special operations. And then all of a sudden 9/11 happened. And to me, it ultimately seemed like it was my duty. So when I graduated from high school, I went to college with the intention of, after I went to college, I was going to join the military. It was just kind of a matter of me figuring out what branch I wanted to go into, what my specialty was going to be. So I tried to take my college experience and really tailor it towards getting myself ready for the military.
Did you have any fear at all? Let's see how I put this. I'm a kid growing up in Queens, and I walk down the streets. I'm looking to make sure that, I'm looking over my shoulder, and I want to make sure I don't get mugged. I want to make sure I'm safe. The thought of ever going into the military, knowing what could happen, if I can be completely honest with you, would have scared the shit out of me at that stage in my life, and still does. But there was something inside of you that actually you're one of those guys that may, want to run to the fire, right? So has that always been the case for you?
I think I've just always naturally found myself in leadership positions, whether it be, within school, working for my father, sports teams. And so that's just kind of been a natural inclination for me to want to step up for things like that. But, a lot of people do ask me, though, was I scared? Was I ever scared? The truthful answer is I was scared all the time. The day that I had to ship out to basic training, I was 22 years old, former college football player, getting ready to go to special forces training. And I'm just like crying hysterically in the airport because I just understand how different my life is going to be and understand the risks that I'm about ready to endure. And, that fear really carried it throughout the whole time. It carried throughout the whole time that I was in the military, get worried about going on the missions. But, I think courage is going forward when the outcome is uncertain. And so when you can start to master the fear that you're facing towards something, then there's no limits for you going forward. It just was a whole process of confronting those fears that I had. And every time I'd go and confront something like that, I'd just become a little bit less scared about it.
All right, so I want to dig into that a little bit. You were deployed twice to Afghanistan. Let's talk about the first one. If I were to put myself in your body, and which is what I try and do, because I know a lot of the people that are listening are similar in mindset to I am. So I try and look at this through their lens. So if I were to put myself in your body and think about what it must have felt like getting on a plane, flying to Afghanistan to fight in the war, to be honest with you, I feel like I want to pass out. Even just saying it, I feel like I want to pass out. So can you sort of take me back to what that moment was like for you, either the days leading up to getting on the plane or actually being on the plane going?
Yeah, the lead up to that first deployment was brutal, because you're always really scared of the unknown. I think especially going into a combat scenario, you can train as much as you want. And we did. I had the best training in the world as a Green Beret. But until you're in that moment, you're still left to question as to how you're going to perform when everybody needs you and they're counting on you. So I was having waking up with panic attacks for a month before going on the deployment, just incredibly nervous of the unknown and mostly nervous of, am I going to be able to live up to this? Am I going to let these guys down that depend on me? And I think also it was very compounded. I was married at the time, and it was a very difficult and brutal thing for my wife to have to deal with. But I think the thing that kept me going, and this is a perfect example of what got me through those really hard times when I was really worried and really scared, is, just before we were going to land in Afghanistan, we stopped in another country to refuel. And I'm outside, I'm smoking cigarettes. I'm dipping Copenhagen. I'm so nervous. I'm just trying to get as much nicotine in my system as I absolutely possibly can. And one of the guys that was there on my team, he was a 12-year veteran at that point. He sees how nervous I am. He comes over to me and he's like, "Hey man, look, things are going to get crazy when we hit the ground. It's going to be really busy. Just want to let you know we're always here for you. We're not going to let you fail. This is a team." And I think from that point on, that really started to quell my fears going forward, because I knew it was going to be tough. I knew I was going to make the wrong decision every once in a while. But at the end of the day, I was going to get backed up by some of the best people I've ever met in my life.
All right. So now you land. Now you're in Afghanistan, right? You have to go through whatever you have to go through, probably a million connections, long time, dealing with the anxiety of getting there, and then you land. Do you land and go, what the hell did I get myself into? Like, take me back to that minute when, you come out of the plane, the sand hits you in the face, and it's real.
Yeah, I think it's funny because you build it up so much in your moment. Like, what's it going to be like when you first step foot on the soil? And it's not like people like shooting at you or anything. And so it was really surreal though to do it, because this is something I'd wanted to do since I was 14. When I first got to Afghanistan, I was 25, so it's 11 years later, and I'm finally in this moment. It was kind of like an Olympic athlete that trains for so long, and then they finally get to their race, or you're training and you get to the Super Bowl. And so for me, like, I have that. I think that's why I had the nerves that were so great, because I was going to like what I considered to be my championship event. But when I got there, I was really excited, because I was like, this is it though. Like, I was scared, but I was excited too, to finally be in the place that I had trained for so long to get to.
Was it anticlimactic in any way, where you're like, this is not what I thought? Or were you just sort of like along for the ride and just, allowing the experience to open up as it did naturally?
Yeah, the experience was just so much of a water hose. I had gotten to my special forces team a little bit late, actually, so I didn't get a chance to train up with them before the deployment. So, and I think this is another reason that added to my anxiety for the trip. Like, for instance, I shot my assigned rifle for the first time the day I got to Afghanistan. And, I had no training with these guys. The first live fire exercise that I ever did with them was a 5-hour firefight with them. So the learning curve for me was immense. I mean, like, just a water hose times 10. So the whole thing, it certainly wasn't anticlimactic, because I just had so much to learn and so much to do, and so much was happening all the time for me. So I think it definitely lived up to everything, and it answered a lot of questions for me, because like, as I was going through special forces training, I would think to myself, like, is this training really serving a purpose, or are they just doing it to weed us out? I'd go a month, I'd lose 30 pounds. I'd go a week without eating, not sleep for 3 or 4 days. But pretty quickly, when I got to Afghanistan, I understood that all of that training served a purpose, that they were preparing us for this incredibly intense moment in life. And it kind of taught me the lesson that you need to be able to take a step back and understand that there's things that are happening for a reason. They're preparing you for things in the future.
But why did you not have that live fire training before you went there?
That's just how it works sometimes. I think, especially when you think, this was 2010, the war in Afghanistan was really picking up. It was pretty big in Iraq. So you had a lot of people just rotating in and out. And, that was a pretty common occurrence, where guys would get put on a team that was deploying pretty quickly, not have a chance to train with them, and they would just learn that job on the fly. But, luckily for me, I had incredible guys on my team that took me under their wing. They hazed me quite a bit in a good way to make sure that I understood everything and what was going on. But I think that's also to the nature of the selection process for the Green Berets. That we want to get guys that are going to get put into situations that are going to be tough, but they're going to be able to figure them out.
I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and it's really, really difficult to do. How was sleeping at night? Was sleep, like, I live in a building in Buckhead in downtown Atlanta, or in the middle of Atlanta. There's a lot of street noise. I hear a beeping car and I wake up. What the hell is it like in Afghanistan?
I never really had a problem sleeping because I was just so tired all the time. That first deployment was a very intense deployment. There were some intense combat moments, but it was also because we were in northern Afghanistan at the time, and the majority of the focus was on the southern part of the country. So our supply line wasn't great to us. We really didn't have good running water source for almost 6 months. Electricity was pretty sparse for half of the deployment. It was a 7-month deployment. So I was the engineer on my team. So it was my responsibility to be like building the base, to maintaining things, in addition to running missions, in addition to training the Afghan soldiers and, carrying out some other projects that I had. So I was sleeping like 4 or 5 hours a night for the most part, for the majority of the deployment. So for me, when it was time for me to get some sleep, I could sleep anywhere at that point. And I remember too, like hearing like some mortars go off in the background and just wake up and I'm like, oh, okay, I got to go back to sleep. I got another hour or two.
You go right back to bed. So I guess with complete exhaustion, your brain or your body just says, look, I need rest. I'm shutting down. Did you wake up in the morning and say like, I gotta get out of here. Like, what am I doing here? Or were you like, I'm all in? Or is it like your, that reptilian survival part of your brain just takes over and you're just locked on a mission?
Yeah, for me, I think it was twofold. I think the training was so good that I'd gone through for years, and then my team was continuously putting me into. So I felt very locked in when I was in on the missions. And then also too, you have a special forces team that's made up of 12 guys. And so the way I felt about things was when we go out on a mission, that meant that there was 11 other lives that were more important than mine. And I know that every other guy felt the same way about it. It's just this incredible love. So that to me was like a big driver too, to want to get in there, to be locked in, to be prepared, to do the absolute best job every single day that I went out there and went to work.
Why were the other lives more important than your own?
I think it's that brotherhood that you have and just that love of one another that you develop through going through these very hard and very difficult times with each other. It's almost more painful, for somebody to see another one of their friends wounded, because they just feel so bad, so guilty that they had gotten hurt or they had gotten killed, and almost you have this sense of like letting them down. And so I think that feeling, it can drive incredible performance, but ultimately too, that can be a detriment to your performance, because you get so worried about that or get so caught up with it. And then you think of like people having survivor's guilt after deployments.
Yeah. Let's move on to your second deployment. This is the story that you told us in Boston, and it was absolutely, it's one of those moments where they call it a flashbulb moment, where you know exactly where you were when you heard that story, because you had everybody in that room. Like, there could have been bombs going off around our restaurant and nobody would have heard it. They were so locked in to your story. So maybe, for the sake of time, I know it's difficult to do here because we were there for an hour, but maybe you can sort of give us the highlights of what happened on the morning of September 25th, 2011.
Sure. Yeah, so we were 7 months into our second Afghanistan rotation. So basically, you think of, we came home from our first rotation on a Friday. We went back to work on a Monday and just got told we were going to go back to the same location to train the same Afghan commandos 7 months later. So after doing some train ups, a quick trip to Southeast Asia, and that 7 months off, we found ourselves right back in Afghanistan working with the same guys. This was very fortuitous, actually, because we were able to just hit the ground running. So we'd built up a lot of rapport with them on the first deployment. And so 7 months into this second deployment, we got ordered to do a valley clearing operation in the northwestern part of Afghanistan. And so basically, we would get dropped off at one end of a valley. We would clear through this valley, going to the villages, talking to the people, collecting information, looking for weapons caches. And about every 1 out of 5 times, we'd get into a firefight. So this morning, we landed just before the sun came up, started clearing through the villages, and about an hour into it, just as the sun started to come over the mountaintops, one of my teammates in his squad, about 10 Afghans, they came under some heavy fire. And so we decided the best course of action there was to just drop some bombs on that location. But instead of kind of quelling the enemy that day, that really emboldened them. And so for the next 10 hours, we just found ourselves kind of going back and forth in this valley until I found myself up on a rooftop on the western side of the valley. We were taking a lot of fire from a compound to the north of us. And we had an open field that separated us from this compound. And so my teammate on the eastern side of the valley decided he was going to volunteer to go take this compound down. So it's like an incredibly dangerous feat to do, to go across, to be in a firefight in general, but then to cross an open field was practically suicidal. So myself, at 27 years old, in my infinite wisdom, thought that I had less of a chance of getting shot on this rooftop. So I just stood up and started kind of walking around to try to draw fire to myself. And then my teammates at the same time, exposed themselves to their positions and started waving these bright colored, like construction vest-like things called BS-17 panels in the air to try to draw fire to themselves. And our tactic worked great. It worked even better than we'd wanted it to. And once my teammate made it to the compound, I looked down at the Afghan soldiers and I was like, if we don't get off this roof, we're going to get shot. And they didn't speak any English, but that was the quickest I saw those guys move because they practically jumped off of the roof. And I was the last person down the roof. I went down the back side of the building and I started to creep up along the side of the building. At this point, we were taking fire directly in front of us from a dry riverbed, and we were on the top part of a slope. And so I was just thinking, like, how am I going to regroup my guys? How am I going to attack down the slope into this position? What are we going to do to take this enemy position out? And I crept up to the corner of the building, kind of exposed myself to get this vantage point real quick. And then all of a sudden, it felt like I got hit in the stomach with a sledgehammer, just suspended in midair. I slam off the ground, my helmet, my headphones fly off. Just have to really fight just to keep conscious because I was in so much pain. And I think a testament to the training that I received, once I gained my composure back, everything kicked in. I called my teammates. I let them know where I was, how dire the situation was, what had happened to me. I put my head, all right. And then, I thought I'd gotten shot in the leg because when I got shot in the stomach right below my body armor and the femoral nerve had been hit. So I had this intense pain down my left leg. I said to myself, like, you got a couple minutes to live. So you better get to work. And I grabbed my tourniquet, started to try to see where I would need to place it on my leg, but really there was no blood, nothing in I hadn't been shot in the leg, and I could just see a little bit of blood on my t-shirt and my stomach. And so there was nothing I could do, just sitting out there in the open, waiting for my team to be able to get to me. I call them again. The fight had really picked up. They were pinned down by some pretty heavy fire. And then I look up and an Afghan soldier gets me and drags me behind the building right when my team starts to flood in to the situation, and guys start to frantically work on me. And I could hear people going up to our medic saying, is Kevin going to make it or not? And he was like, I don't know. It looks pretty bad. So those guys didn't know at the time. I could hear these entire conversations. And then, people are coming up to me, telling me they love me and they have tears in their eyes. They haven't paid me a compliment in 3 years. And I'm like, whoa, I think this is it. You've had a lot of close calls, but this one is it for you. And so with every minute that went by, I started to think that was my last minute on Earth.
And when you think of it being your last minute on Earth, what's going through your head? Is it, you didn't have children at the time, right?
Right. I didn't have children at the time. This time was, I was 27 at the time. And, I was 27 years old having a conversation with myself that most people don't necessarily have until they're in their 70s, 80s, 90 years old. And just sitting there thinking, you start questioning everything that you've done in your life. You start to question if you're a good person, if you're a good husband, if you're a good father, if you've lived your life the way that you wanted to live your life. And, the thing that I tell people is, when you're faced with what you think is going to be your death, you're not sitting there worrying about all the things that you worry about on a daily basis. I didn't worry about how much money I had or the car that I drove, or say to myself, I wish I had worked more. I thought about certain aspects of my life that I really wish I had improved. And, people ask me after everything you've been through, all the aspects of war, getting wounded, losing friends, what's the worst thing that can ever happen to you in life? And I say flat out, it's when you have this type of conversation with yourself and you don't like the answers you get back.
Chilling. I remember you saying that. What was fascinating to all of us who had the chance to listen to that story in person with you is that by dumb luck, one of your fellow guys on your team had his helmet cam on. And a lot of what you just described was filmed. And so we got a chance to actually see everything you just described live, on video. And everybody's heart just sunk. I mean, there were tears, and people are still talking about it. It's really intense to see. And we'll link up in the show notes where people can watch that video. A couple of thoughts on that I wanted to talk to you about. The first one is it was actually nothing like television. It was nothing like I've seen a million war movies, and it wasn't like that. There was an element, because it was real, there was an element that wasn't as polished, even when they try and make movies look real. The first comment is, I would have suspected that it would have been a bit more organized, systematic, controlled. And it wasn't. It seemed like there was a lot of panic, nervous energy, a little bit of freak out. Like, it was more chaotic. And I get it. It's a war. So I'm not discounting that. But do you think that you can only train so much, but when it really happens, yes, your training's going to kick in. You've got to do the best you can, but it's still the first time it's ever happened. Do you think that there's that you can only train so hard for this kind of thing?
Right. Yeah. I think you can only train so hard for something like that until you actually just go out and experience it. It's just like, I had trained as much as I possibly could for war until I finally just had to go out and experience it and start learning lessons, most of the time the hard way. And I also think too, there's kind of like two other factors that you think about, right? Like you see the video, but you don't see everything that led up to it, right? So that was 10 hours into a firefight of like carrying gear. It's 90 degrees in September, and just like the exhaustion factor of being in that type of situation. And then I think too, one of the things that, as Green Berets, you always have to just get really comfortable with too, is like the chaos that you're always going to be facing, due to the combat that you're going to be in. And then also too, your job is to work with foreign soldiers. And so you're typically, we're working with Afghan soldiers that majority of us don't speak the language, and, we're outnumbered typically 10-1 on a mission. And so, and sometimes it seems like we think our job was like herding cats more than anything else.
Yeah, because they're not trained the same way you are, and I'm sure, not to discount the Afghan soldiers, but I'm sure that they're lacking in the sophistication, let's say, for lack of a better word, than we have in the States. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a whole different world. I mean, I love the guys that I worked with, and they saved my life on numerous occasions. But I think it was hard for me to grasp initially just how different it was, how different their worlds are, how different they view things. And so it really taught me how to adapt to a different culture. It's translated very well into the business world. Like, you're going to have to change the way that you do your management style to convey your message to people, just because you think it's like a whole different culture. It's a whole different religion. The languages, a lot of the guys might not have even been able to read, and we have our definition of what we say a country is, and we have our pride in our country, but it's a very tribal society there. So the concept of Afghanistan for them is kind of loose for some of them. They have more allegiance to their tribe than they would their country. So there's just so many different dynamics that kind of went into the training piece, and getting this ball rolling, and getting them training, and getting them planning, and then getting out and executing the missions properly.
When you live in Boston, it's a melting pot like most cities. When you move around Boston and you see somebody that, clearly looks like they're from that part of the world, what do you think? What goes through your head? Anything?
No, nothing. I think, I'd spent a lot of time, 2 deployments in Afghanistan. I got to know the people really well, really appreciated the culture, the customs, learned a lot about everybody there. And I say anybody that wants to come to the United States is somebody I want on my team. You're going to leave everything that you know You're going to leave your family. You're going to leave your friends. You're going to leave your comfort and come over here. Like, I want you here. I want you here, like building the society up to what it is.
Was there any cultural differences that you learned that you liked and or adopted? And it could be, food, could be a ritual. It doesn't have to be religion or anything, but was there something that you were like, I like how they do this. This is different.
Yeah. One of the things there's so many things that I learned there. And that was when I think back to my first deployment, I think I really failed at developing a deeper connection with the Afghan commandos and understanding what made them tick and understand what was important to them and relate to them, that I cared about them on a level higher than just the professional one that we had. So when I went back the second time, I made an incredible effort to do that, to spend the majority of my free time with them, to show them that I valued them as a friend rather than a peer. And then I'd also do things to kind of reverse the tables. I wasn't always teaching them. They were teaching me, taught me Afghan Dari. They taught me Afghan dancing, which I was terrible at, but like they loved the fact that I was willing to embarrass myself to do that.
What's Afghan Dari?
Dari is a language spoken predominantly in northern Afghanistan.
Okay, so it's a language. How did you get any good at it?
I was getting pretty good. Yeah, I like phonetically learned it. I would have, I'd go there. We'd do it a couple hours a week, and they would sit there and teach me different things, correct me when I was on missions. They loved hearing me talk and correcting me and making fun of me. So it was pretty comical for those guys. And I found out too, like they love professional wrestling there, and they love John Cena. And so my wife sent me over a Hulk Hogan outfit because I had long hair. It was blonde. I had a beard. I was like 40 pounds more muscular. And so I would just like challenge these guys to wrestling matches all the time. And they loved it. They ate it up.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I do hear stories from people who were there saying it wasn't all bad. And there were some times that were, that were really great. There's something that just popped in my head. You may dig this. There is a new Netflix show. I have to find the name of it, but it's by Larry Charles, who was one of the co-writers of Seinfeld with Larry David, and he also did he wrote Borat, all of the Sacha Baron Cohen movies, and he realized that even in Afghanistan there are comedians because we need to laugh, we need to have a good time. Some of these comedians actually wound up getting killed, but the culture needed to laugh. And it's like a 4-part series where he goes around to places like Afghanistan, and he meets with the comedians and people to talk about why they just need to laugh. I think you dig that.
Yeah, I think that's a spot on assessment. It just can't always be like missions, danger, combat. When I started spending that time with them and unraveling those things and, making like just bonding time and us having mock wrestling matches, that's when I really got to know them. That's when they really got to trust me. And then everything else was significantly better at that point. Just learned so much about them and their culture.
Yeah. It's called The Dangerous World of Comedy. That's what it's called. The Dangerous World of Comedy. So you got to check that out.
Well, I know what I'm going to be Netflixing tonight. Friday.
Yeah, I'm telling you, you're gonna dig it. It's really, really interesting. There's a lot of subtitles, so you got to let the kids go to sleep because you have to focus.
Yeah.
When you watch that video of yourself, do you see it the same way, or did your brain start changing that event into something else? Because it's interesting. Because it's like we have these. There's a lot of science that shows that over years we start changing what we thought something was. But in your case, you can't do that because you have a video of a significant portion of it. But when you watch that video, do you see things that you didn't remember?
Yeah, I think I see things that I didn't remember, or it's a good way to jog my memory. Love to be able to watch it every once in a while just to give myself a little perspective of what it was, conceivably the worst day of my life at the time. I think the thing that's changed the most about that video is just how I view it in terms of like what it means to me. And, initially after I was hurt and in a really dark place and kind of questioning why all this was happening to me, that was just this reminder of that incident to me. And so now it's a reminder of that incident to me, but I'm 7.5 years removed and I'm in an incredible place in life. And so I view that now. I get to see that. I'm like, this is the best video I'll ever watch in my life, because it reminds me of the day that my life was changed and I was put on this incredible path. And now I am the absolute best version of myself.
Yeah, amazing. It's truly incredible. I know that there were, not everything was easy. There were points where your wife had to kick you in the tail and say, it's time to recover and it's time to move on. But you did. And you ultimately went on to getting to not only get yourself kicked in the pants. I mean, you excelled. You ultimately went on to getting a dual master's degree, one at Harvard and one at MIT, which we talked about when we met. And so I think what I'd like to do here is to kind of move into sort of the second part of the show, which is more about the art of fulfillment, and maybe talk about some of the things that you're doing sort of post-war, let's call it, to improve your life. So I guess the first question I have is, are there any positions or opinions in the last few years, or it could be way back, it doesn't have to be in the last few years, that you've changed substantially, where you've shifted your position or you've completely changed your mind about, like back then I thought of it that way, but now I look at it differently. Does anything like that come to mind for you?
I think one thing that really stands out to me is when I was on the back of a helicopter on my second deployment. I was like 26 or 27. Actually, I had 2 birthdays in a row in Afghanistan. Really good celebrations there. Had salmonella poisoning for one of them. It's great. But
yeah. Oh, sexy. Okay.
Yeah, loved it. But yeah, I'm sitting on the back of this helicopter. It's probably 3:00 in the morning. We're flying over the mountains. We're getting ready to go assault a village. A Green Beret. I got 40 people I'm in charge of. I got my weapons, my explosives, and I'm like, this is it. This is the coolest you'll ever be in your life.
It's so funny. You remember Top Gun, Tom Cruise's movie Top Gun?
Yep.
Do you remember Goose in Top Gun?
Mm-hmm.
I saw him on TV last night. He's not cool anymore. Yeah. It's not sexy. So you're right. My wife says we get one hot period. We should enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you could spend 1 month anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
I would go to Thailand. I actually went there on a training mission in between both of my Afghanistan rotations, and absolutely love the culture, love the people. And so at some point would love to be able to go back there for a month, take my wife, bring my kids, expose them to that side of the world.
Love it. I haven't done that one, but I would definitely like to do it. Weird question, but if you can only eat at one restaurant before you die, where would your last meal be?
Mother Anna's in the north end of Boston.
I wish you told me that when I was in the north end of Boston.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
My wife used to wait tables there when she was getting her master's at BU. And so that was my first introduction to that place, and fell in love ever since.
It's called Mother Anna, huh?
Yep. Right on the, it's the first restaurant on Hanover Street there.
We had dinner at Luca.
That's another great place too.
Yeah, it was really, really great.
And I would have to eat that meal too. I was going to say, because I'd probably, feel like I would die afterwards after like not eating gluten and sugar and soy and dairy for months on end.
What's the one thing that's rocking your world now that has nothing to do with work?
Yoga.
Isn't it amazing?
It is unreal. And so it's a
hot yoga.
Hot yoga. Get it up to 110, maybe 120 degrees. Maybe I feel like I'm back in Afghanistan again with the heat. But
but it's the shit. It's amazing.
Yeah,
it really is amazing.
I go 3 to 4 times a week. I was really heavy in this when I initially got hurt in my recovery. It kind of tapered off for a couple, 3 or 4 years, and then I just started picking it back up again 6 or 7 months ago. We're going like 3 or 4 times a week, and just feel incredible. It's been an amazing complement to everything else that I'm doing physically, mentally, and just feel awesome.
Amazing. What's one thing that your soul has been really calling you to do, but for whatever the reason is, you just haven't pulled your trigger on? And it could be anything. It could be guitars, learning how to play guitar, learning Chinese. Like, what's the thing that your soul's been calling you to do, and you keep saying, I'll get to it?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned guitar. I think that's actually it. I always wanted to learn a instrument. And so I packed a guitar for my second deployment and was going to, in the winter months, combat operations slow down a little bit. So I was like, wow, I'll learn the guitar then. But then I got shot right before the winter kind of kicked off. And so I didn't have the opportunity to learn. And my teammate who was killed in action, he loved playing that guitar, played it all the time. And so I kept it, and I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it because I just thought about how much he enjoyed using it. And it was tough for me to even open it up or pick it up or think that I was going to learn the guitar. But recently, we gave my youngest daughter a guitar for Christmas because she'd been asking for one. So I was like, all right, man, it's time for you to get that guitar out of the basement. And you and your daughter need to start. This could be something you two can do together. And so I think that's the thing that I really want to pick up.
Amazing. Love that story. All right. So we're going to wrap up with the rapid fire round of questions. Answer as quickly or as slowly as you'd like. It's basically first thing that comes to mind rounds. What would your friends say is one of your superpowers?
Resilience.
What's one of the things you're afraid of right now?
I think not achieving my purpose in life.
What keeps you up at night?
Sleeping pretty sound lately, so that's pretty good.
Okay. Good enough. I don't want to screw that up. What do people never ask you, but you wish they did?
A lot of people ask me a lot of stuff about veterans. And so I would like people to ask me, what do I think common misconceptions are about veterans? I think people get a little nervous to ask questions like that about veterans, but I'm an open book, so people can ask me anything.
It's great. And, speaking for a guy who asks questions for a living, we just get nervous, forgive the pun, that we're going to step on a landmine and insult somebody. So I think that's really, really great that you said that, because we just don't, because it's such a sensitive subject and we've never had personal experience with it. So we have no idea what's okay to ask and what's insulting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I would love to see that gap bridged, this kind of military-civilian divide that I feel like has been growing a little bit, because I think there's just so much that the civilian world can learn from the lessons that men and women have learned and paid for in blood in the military. And then I also think, too, if there's this greater understanding in the civilian world of what the veterans went through, the lessons they learned, their capabilities, there could be a better dialogue as they transition out of the military and go into the civilian world.
Well, I tell you what does not exist, and that's Ask the Military Guy Q&A. There's Ask the Pilots podcasts, but there's not one for this. So that's something that you should definitely consider, because I think it would be great. I think it would be an awesome show that people can listen to and learn, because, I want to know when I'm flying in the plane, why do we have turbulence? And is it something that's dangerous? So I listen to the podcast and it tells me it's not a big deal. Takeoffs and landings are worse. So it's just a way of, educating yourself. So maybe you got a new career as a podcaster.
Yeah. I'm going to be picking your brain about that.
You got it. What book have you reread the most?
The book,
other than the Bible?
Yeah. So actually, coincidentally, I just finished it yesterday, the second time, cover to cover. It's funny you mentioned that, but the book that I've reread the most is The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. It's he was a Vietnam guy, author, pretty, I would say probably the most popular book to come out of the Vietnam War. And for me, I read it when I was deployed, and I read it after I was deployed a couple times. And it's just very much, I felt like resonated a lot with my experience. And it was interesting to read it in different parallels or, different aspects of my life, because it had different meanings to me at each one.
Awesome. What's your guilty pleasure?
Guilty. Well, my guilty pleasures used to be, binging on some type of food, but I've tried to be really good about that. So I would say Netflix now is my guilty pleasure.
Someone just asked me that. It's Netflix. It's so freaking good. You can get a television show for anything you're interested in. I love it. All right, so we'll wrap up with the last question, which is a little bit of a change up. What one question would you like to ask me?
I would love to hear what you would do differently. If you could think back to, I would say the age of 30, right? I think 30 is really this transitional period where you're kind of coming out of your youth, getting very serious about what you're doing with your life. You got a little bit more life experience. So from where you're at now, think back to when you were 30. What would some of the things be a little bit different that you would do?
I can tell you instantly, it would have been to focus more time on my family and my children, or my child at the time. I have a 20-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old daughter. And in my 30s, it was about, conquering Poland. I wanted to, had a million dreams of, I'm going to become a millionaire. I'm going to open this business. And, every book that I read was about consuming entrepreneurship. And it was, some version of make money, work, etc. And now looking back, there were a tremendous amount of opportunities I had to better shape my 20-year-old, i.e. spending more time doing things like learning about art together, talking about music, maybe going to an opera, all of the things that have nothing to do with business that shape who we are as a human being. We're so much more than this one-dimensional work, achieve person. And I really believe as I get older, I'll be 53 this year. And I don't know shit about wine, art, opera, the arts in general. I can't speak another language. And I would have put even 20%. I get that there's a season of life that we're in. You can't be, studying opera, when you're 30, when you're, just married with a kid. I get that. But I wish that I just put a little bit more time in with her and with something other than business, because I woke up at 50 feeling really freaking one-dimensional and just, like I can have a conversation with anybody about growing the business, about entrepreneurship, but I don't know anything about the military. There's so many things I don't know about, and I wouldn't read a book about it. I wouldn't watch a TV show about it. I was just myopic in my approach. So long answer, but that's how I answer.
Oh, that's awesome advice. Turned 35 at the end of May. I got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old girl. So I think it's incredible advice for me, especially at the spot that I'm at in life right now.
Yeah, take the time. Like, it's okay to say, you know what? I'm not working Saturdays and Sundays. I'm not going to do it. I don't care. Saturdays and Sundays, I am devoting to teaching her the guitar or learning to play the guitar together, or, looking at a map and talking about this is Africa and this is why I'd love to go to Africa, dreaming, just taking the time to just shut the entrepreneurial side off. Some people need the opposite advice. Some people need to say, hey, get off the surfboard and start learning about entrepreneurship,
Right, yeah.
But most of the people in your world and my world, because that's how we're attracted to each other, don't do that. So I love that. So thank you for asking me that question. Do you have any final words, suggestions, or an ask for the people that are listening?
Yeah, so I have 2 asks. I am a board of directors member of the Green Beret Foundation. That is a foundation that exists to serve the members of the Special Forces Regiment, the Green Berets, their families. If individuals are killed in action, we're going to be there for their families. If individuals come back wounded, like myself, we're going to be there for you throughout the duration. And the foundation was there for my wife and I from day one. And they never asked anything in return. And so now I'm on the board of directors. It's my purpose in life to make sure that I can provide that same care to everyone that comes home in the condition I came in. So if you could go to greenberetfoundation.org, check out the website, see if there's any way that you can help out financially or events going on in your area. goals. You can learn more about the foundation, about the Green Berets and their missions and why it's so important that we continue to support them. That's greenberetfoundation.org. And then also, the other real purpose and passion of my life, say in addition to being the best father and husband and citizen of this country that it can be, is to share the lessons that I have learned from the darkest period of my life so that other people can benefit from them. So please visit my website. That's woundedbywar.com. That's woundedbywar.com. And, follow me on there. Follow me on social media. I'm at Wounded by War on Instagram. Wounded by War is my Facebook page, and you can get in contact with me through any of those means. So if you found today's discussion inspirational, you think you got some people out there that should hear this, please share and spread the word.
Amazing. I will link it all up in the show notes. I think some of our mastermind members made some donations to that charity, and I'm glad that we can spread that word for you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob.
You got it, brother. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening. If you love this episode and you know someone that needs some help in either stepping up their work hard game or their play hard game, it would mean the world to me if you shared this podcast with them to help me get this movement out there. So if you like what you heard, head on over to iTunes, take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star review, and I will be forever grateful. So until the next episode, excuses are over. It's time to live.